All right. So good evening, task force members. Welcome to the May 8th Lorton Visiting Task Force meeting. We have a few folks that will be coming in shortly, but we'll go ahead and get started with our agenda. We have a pretty full agenda, and we want to thank our consultants for being here this evening. So thank you very much. And we go through that. Ernestine Morin today is her birthday, so we're going to celebrate sort of without her actually being here. So we have some cupcakes, and we can share those at the end if we're end on time here according to the agenda. We have a few moments to celebrate and enjoy some cupcakes. I think we'll all be ready for a snack by the time this meeting is over. If there are no other announcements, I'll ask staff. If there's no other announcements, we can start with our visioning statement. We go through that.
When we met the first time, I think you all requested a quick overview of the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
As a vision statement will become a part of the comprehensive plan. So Leah's going to provide that over 5 minutes.
Okay, turn it over to you, Leah.
Okay, great. Yeah. Please say 5 minutes. Because I know you guys have all seen this before, but just as a refresher, so we're kind of all on the same page. Just a refresher, the comprehensive plan is the guide that reflects the community's long-term land use vision for the future, such as where growth can be accommodated and the protection of environmental and cultural resources. The comprehensive plan includes 4 area plan volumes, which identify key elements for implementing the policy plan's goals and objectives at more specific land use guidance, including area-wide guidance and site-specific recommendations. The recommendations in the comprehensive plan are used by the Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, county staff, and the community as a common basis for decision-making on land use applications. So the Lorton Visioning Plan Amendment is proposing land use changes specifically in the LP to Lorton South Route 1 community planning sector within Area Plan 4. And this is outlined above in the plan map shown outlined in red, and it displays the baseline map plans for land uses such as public parks, shown in dark green, retail, shown in red, etc. So it's a living document, and the changes to it are called amendments. I'm going through one right now, and this involves extensive community engagement. Next one. So it's important to remember that the comprehensive plan is a guide. It's not law. It provides recommendations about land uses, which includes density and intensity, transportation, environment, and other topics. The plan is implemented through zoning, which is law, and where more specific standards will be applied, such as regulations for use types, setbacks, open space, building height, and other project-specific aspects of development. So the comprehensive plan is implemented through zoning and the rezoning applications and development review, and this is where more specific standards will be applied. So the concept for future development is the foundation for recommendations found in the area plans. Each land use classification represented on the map is associated with its own recommendations for how these areas should develop over time. So the definition of a suburban center is described as employment centers located along major arterials. These areas are evolving to include mixed-use cores, such as transit station areas and town centers that are more urban in character. The core areas are generally surrounded by transitional areas of lesser intensity. So there are a total of 6 urban centers, as you can see outlined up there. And Lorton, which is number 1 on the map above, is one of 2 that does not have a designated core. Flint Hill is the other one. It's number 5 on the map above. And that doesn't have a core either. So the community's vision will set forth guidance for land use patterns that support the creation of a core, which is why we're all here today. So just going over some terms that are used in the comprehensive plan, and you'll probably hear tonight. Density and intensity, so these are the 2 most common terms that we use, and it's used to convey the quantity and scale of development. So quickly going over, residential density is the most often measured in dwelling units per acre. So fewer dwelling units per acre is generally a less dense development. For example, single-family detached dwelling units are often located in a 1 to 4 dwelling unit per acre and are considered low-density developments, so you can see on the scale. So examples of high-density residential uses include Beacon of Broughton, developed at a 63 dwelling units per acre, as you can see up there. And then another higher one is the Shelby Apartments at 72 dwelling units per acre, as seen on the far right. And that also has commercial on the bottom. And then another term, non-residential and mixed-use development intensity is often used as a floor area ratio, which is obtained by dividing the floor area of the building by the land area. So similar to density, the lower the number, the less intense the development. Here, visually see it, Gunston Plaza, as seen in the first top left image, has an existing intensity of 0.32 FAR, as well as Lorton Station up there. And then the other nearby activity nodes, such as Lorton Station and Lorton Marketplace, are similarly planned at 0.3 FAR and 0.25 FAR, respectively. So a more pedestrian-oriented mixed-use developments with structured parking, as you can see under the medium category, begin to get to the 1.0 FAR or higher range. And then the more urban transit station areas with high-rise construction can reach up to over 3 FAR. Just some visuals. And then you've seen this before, so as we've discussed in the March meeting, here's just a snippet from the McLean Community Business Center text. It's an example of how a community's vision and task force visioning principles come together and is reflected in the comprehensive plan. So this is taken right out from the comprehensive plan for the McLean CBC. So you have the vision at the top, followed by the visioning guidelines. And then, so going back to what we're here today, using the county's updated outlines for area plan guidance and similar to the recently adopted text that we just saw, the task force's finalized version of the community vision statement will be recommended for inclusion as the intro to the Lorton South Route 1 Suburban Center text, along with the task force's guiding visioning principles seen above. So that's my wrap up, and so I'm going to transition back to the co-chair for adoption of the vision statement.
Okay, so thank you, we appreciate that. And we received a draft and the markup for the community vision statement. Are there questions?
Yeah,
Edits?
yeah.
All right.
Consistent with some of my comments from the last meeting. I'm concerned about including too much language for the Route 1 South area. Don't want it to become a distraction for the board. No problem with that. I just don't, again, my words are chosen carefully. I don't want it to be a distraction. But we can do this down there instead of up here. I really want us to resolve it. What we're talking about. My other comment is this third bullet is a disaster.
It's on page.
It's on page 2 of the first one at the top of the page. The third bullet, the one that starts with established Lorton Road as a local serving boulevard. And it goes on to really.
No, that's third bullet on the first page.
First page, still on the first page.
That's exactly what we talked about.
What you got?
I
Yeah, what we have here is.
Yeah.
well, I mean, I have that one too. I assume they're the same, except for one's red, one's not. But
Double-sided.
but that bullet, that's just nonsensical, completely illogical. Yeah, the one that started with established Lorton Road as a local serving boulevard. Discourage country traffic. We've discussed before, there's not an option right now. 95 has to be fixed. Get the traffic off Lorton Road so you can use boulevard. Again, I have no problem with it being the focal point of what we're doing, but the center, the bullseye, it's not where you're going to be able to have restaurants on the side of the road. I mean, who wants to sit at a restaurant that's traffic at running hour. I mean, it's gonna,
But isn't that the whole point of this? This is, and first of all, we've been talking about this exact piece for a while. And this is pretty much the vision that I've heard us talking about. So I'm
well, it's the area, but why, if you have this bullet in there, you are absolutely limiting yourself to Lorton Road. And it's not suitable for that use right now because of the traffic patterns in the area.
I think that, that's the point, because it says to take that, first of all, you create the vision, and then it says, and then to now create urban design elements to improve the pedestrian comfort on it, what you just talked about, and safety that include wider walkways and landscape mediums and improved planning signage, public art and streets to do exactly that, which is to slow that area, to make it less desirable for a cut through.
But nobody does that at all. Name one town center community that has the main artery right through the center of it. That's not the way it works.
Well, it's not a main artery. It is, the truth is, if you look for where Lorton Road between Route 1.
It's not the busiest, but it's a main artery.
Well,
It's
currently designed more that way as a bypass and a means of feeding 95 traffic.
Yeah.
195 traffic is being addressed, and we just had the opening ceremony just a week ago, and we'll start to see some improvements on that. So that should
just south of here.
Right, but that's
not
where,
through the main thing.
but that's what causes every backup here is that. And then this is, the vision is to take a piece of our community.
We need to be able to talk about other things like Lorton Station Boulevard and Market Street, stuff like that.
Do what with
This focuses us only on Lorton Road, which of course has other issues, including RPAs and floodplains.
But that's the area. But that's the area we've been talking about.
No, it's not. We've been talking.
Okay.
About that's there. And I mean, it's time. It's time. Okay, it's time. We need to talk about conflicts too. Okay. Seriously, we need to go here because this has been steered to this. If you can put that map up there, I'd like Tim to point out the investment properties that he owns on Lorton Road.
So
this is not about the community to you.
Liquid. Again, we've talked.
It's about half of them, right?
No.
You own about half the houses
I
on
do
Lorton
not.
Road.
I do not.
Before we talk about conflicts,
That's it.
before we talk about conflicts, can we, getting back to Lorton Road, so we talked about it being a boulevard, and I think any type of retail that we put along there will welcome the traffic, but we want to make sure that the traffic, it makes it safe for the folks within the community. So
I'm just saying.
so folks are going to find a way to get around how they're going to get around, right? But we just want to make sure that that road is safe if we're looking at placing the town center somewhere along.
Get around where? What's the options? And that we've talked about it many times. What's the option to Lorton Road? Because everybody would like it to be Lorton Road.
Yeah.
But we have the traffic problems on Lorton Road. We talk about, now how can we divert traffic off of
But
Lorton?
that's what our transportation team is going to help us figure out.
Well, just a suggestion, just any little, why would we go and nail ourselves down and prevent any kind of positive development with, we need to be able to talk about other than Lorton Road. And this just nails it to we want down on Lorton Road.
The purpose for the vision statement is not to nail anything down at this point.
Well, this is exactly what this bullet does.
But it doesn't preclude looking at the other roads, though.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't. This is the step. Like we were saying.
Establish Lorton Road as a local serving boulevard for the town center.
Right. If we're going to put the
town center. That's saying that road has to be the core of the town.
It says A. It doesn't say D, does it? It says
A.
It should say A.
It says as a local serving boulevard for the town center.
So the only issue is specific Lorton Road. Don't just take that out. and just say, establish a local serving boulevard, period.
Well,
I like that.
I think,
I like that.
the last meeting that we had, the conversation actually, specified Lorton Road, improving it. Now, and this language, if I'm not, if I'm incorrect, please let me know. This language is exactly what we agreed on at that last meeting.
No.
And,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
pretty
what-
sure.
I would think I agree.
That's what
That's what was.
Staff
talked
indicated.
about.
So, Mindy, your point, and it is true, that we went around the table talking about where do we think the core is going to be? And again, my comments were, we need to not be distracted by the South, and yes, I agree that that would be the core of what we were doing. I also made comments about Merrifield and the, where the Wegmans is, down in Dale City and stuff like that, that those are not on the main drags. Gallows Road, okay, is the same as Lorton in Merrifield, and that's not the center of the Mosaic District. The center of the Mosaic District is one block off of it. And it's the same thing when you go down to Woodbridge.
Yeah, but what we're doing here on Lorton Road, we're also looking at doing north on Route 1, making it a boulevard.
Yeah.
Where the
And
BRT
I have no problem with Lorton Road being one of the options for what we're going to do. But the way the statement is written right now, again, and I've read it twice now, it says that Lorton Road has to be the boulevard of the town center.
Where would the center be? Where would the road be? Which road would you say is this road that we've been talking
Lorton
about?
Station Boulevard could be an option, but other things we've talked about over the last couple of years is the Wildwood community. If you could consolidate the Wildwood community, make that the
Neither of
boulevard
those.
between Lorton Station.
Sorry, listen, just, let's be clear. We've been at this for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
We've been at it for a very long time. How many, for Linwood and I and for some others?
Yeah.
How many years?
It's too long.
5, 7, 10 years?
I mean,
We've been talking about it for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And just so we're clear, I've been pushing Lorton Road since the
You
beginning,
have.
right?
You have.
And guess what? I didn't own those pieces of Lorton Road back then. I had maybe one piece, one small little piece. And I own lots of parcels. So it's not anything to do with that. I just believe, and have always believed, that that's the center of where this should be, of where this park should go.
It's certainly the bullseye of it, but is it where you want all your pedestrian traffic? Is it where you want your restaurants, where you with on sidewalk dining and stuff like that? I'm like, you need to have other options.
Yeah, listen, Tim,
It's time to not, okay, and perhaps this is just tweaking the little language. But there's no one bullet here that is assigned to priority.
Right.
You have several bullets that complement what has to be included in a vision for Lorton. I think you can maybe finesse the text a little bit so it doesn't seem like one prevails over another. But you can certainly say that all of these things that are as described are the elements of a Lorton vision. It's not one thing. And I think,
That's fine.
okay, well then we can easily adjust that with language, but still emphasize that it should be a local service boulevard of some sort.
Yeah.
Now,
And
to get back to the issues.
all agree that it's the bullseye.
This gets back to the issues that we were talking about the last meeting. What I was talking about the last meeting, and that's the issue of the influence of regional traffic patterns. And that has to be taken. I think you also might want to put in language that says this is incremental. This is over time. I mean, Route 1 in Richmond, who knows when at this point. The point is it's a vision for the future, and it's probably going to be done incrementally as development, gathers in. Same thing here. So I think you can still make Lorton a vital boulevard, a vital part of this whole vision without saying this is it, this is the main order. I think we can tweak the language in a way that allows that to occur, because you really do want all the things you got in there.
So given, sorry.
I'm sorry, so, if we took out for the town center and just said establish Lorton Road as a local serving boulevard, through streetscape and et cetera, would that work?
Absolutely, it would work for me. And
I
another,
mean, for everyone, if we remove that for the town center,
My only concern at this point is we have a room with like 4 or 5 people from the, and so I think we got to be careful about getting, if we're going to veer off course from what we've been talking about. I just think we ought to be more careful about it. I don't think we're at all, well, this is what we've generally been talking about, whether or not, I don't think I personally have ever envisioned that it's only going to be Lorton Road. And I think it ought to expand, and we ought to encompass as much as we can, because I think we have a limited amount of viable space to work with. I can tell you unequivocally, there's not much you're going to be able to do with Lorton Station Boulevard and housing and all the pieces there. Those are pretty well developed and very expensive.
I don't disagree with the word that you're saying.
And Warren side, or excuse me, that other place you have, I looked at the values of all those properties over there. I don't care what you do in here, you're not going to buy that property out. There's not a chance in hell.
Well, I think we're going to be studying this.
It comes out to
I've-
$5 million an acre.
Well, I've seen that. I'm talking about the houses.
I'm just saying,
Wild.
I know, there are.
They're single family.
There are a few, and they go in the back of people's houses, and most of them have been redone, and they're not that big. The biggest challenge we're going to have, and this is from the very beginning, and everybody should probably know this, is that a lot of it's already been developed, and we're constrained, and we've got constraints. And you're right, we got constraints for EQCs and, flood zones and, a whole host of various pieces. So my sense, and I've never wanted to limit it, and I'm not trying to say it only should be on Lorton Road. Really, we need to be able to be as open and broad-minded and be willing to accept as many possibilities. And that's why I'm a little less to say, no, I don't see Route 1 being a main corridor, or excuse me, the main, a town center. Route 1 isn't going to be there. But, I think whatever it is, I think we all have looked at and said, Lorton Road is probably like pretty much the epicenter, and then everything we can get around it. But I don't think we want to say it's the only.
Right.
And it does, but it doesn't say it. It just simply says establish it as a local one. It doesn't say about anything else.
For the town.
Right. And you can turn around and you're going to have there's going to be multiple roads using it. I understand. So I'm saying it could be one of multiple roads. Just one of them.
It wasn't my idea, but I did like the idea of the town center taking that out. And I think it fixes everything. Because I think another thing that we all totally agree on from last meeting is we would love to see Lorton Road with trees in the middle of it. Nice, and I think that would have the natural slowing down effect, stuff like that. So I'm completely good with this.
So we
I'm good with it.
done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to vote.
So we good with what we have a strikeout there, the local serving boulevard as a through streetscape.
Yes.
As a local serving boulevard through streetscape and urban design elements.
So that does it for me.
I'm good with it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
It's,
Abstention.
again, my concern is we don't have enough, players here to really.
So do we table it until?
Certainly, its modification does not keep it from being like that. What I would suggest that we do, add for a bullet, because cut through traffic is our whole problem. On every road that we have right now is we could put in some language that says, think of transportation options to take cut through traffic out of our community.
But I don't
Bullet
know.
that says something
Yeah,
like
but I don't know if we actually want to take out. Tell the Panera that you don't want traffic coming off at 95. That's kill the business, right?
It's
So
true.
we don't want to say we take it out. We want to slow it down and
Hit my salad.
and have people to stop and enjoy what we develop here, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to of a center.
We're
So,
not precluding things.
yeah, not
We're simply enhancing other, important items.
but you're right. We don't want people just whizzing by,
And of
right?
course, the importance of local.
And again, it's always important to know that the vision statement is only one part
Right.
of the plan. It's the opening part of the plan.
And
So, and what we're going to try to make sure of is that gives us flexibility to also write the policy out.
Yes.
And also that policy gives people flexibility to, if people want to face their storefronts toward Lorton Road.
okay, my whole thing was didn't want to limit, want to keep options open.
Right.
You taking the town center out, it completely fixes it in my mind. It wasn't my head, it wasn't my idea.
So with, I ask staff, if we make this modification now, tonight, and then next meeting,
We could vote tonight with the modifications.
So
That's presented.
as presented, okay. And Tim, you are abstaining?
I don't know. I didn't know if this is a real, this is a vote. I mean, we don't have.
But what is the governance on it? Do we have majority? It needs to be a quorum? Because if we keep voting until we get the answer that's preferred, like, that's no bureaucracy here, like, right? So
Two votes.
we have 3 to 4 saying yes.
I mean, we provided from the staff's point of view.
Yes.
We provided last week, or last time we met.
Right.
The edits you guys went over them, we gave them to you all
Right.
to
Yeah.
give us comments back on them. So, and we made it very clear that tonight, that
Yeah.
it would be a vote.
So we did, yeah.
So everyone's aware that could have or not could have attended this meeting.
And there've only been two changes, two from what you saw last week, there've only been 2 changes. We've added 2 bullets.
And
We've
those
added
got out.
How about we do this? How about we defer this for the moment, just keep going, and let's just see, and then we can take a look at it when we get to the end.
It's a big one.
There's only like,
Yeah,
Well,
were there any?
For you.
So that,
I-
was there another bullet or another edit that you?
this was the main one. I thought this was way too limiting language.
Okay.
Again, if you take the language out per suggestion, it totally fits.
Other edits?
So I have a question, another edit, I have a question. On page 2 of 3, bullet 3, this comes up frequently. And I'd like to get a little more of a definition of that. It's established residential neighborhoods.
It really just means residential neighborhoods that are in place that aren't part of a redevelopment plan. So if you're redeveloping up to,
Wouldn't that be everyone, every neighborhood then?
it's not established if you're redeveloping, if there's a plan to redevelop.
Right, but if there's what I'm saying here, so in the existing one that doesn't have a plan, that therefore would be an established neighborhood. So it's every,
Right.
so it's really every neighborhood. I mean, it's rarely that would have a plan with a, but I think there's something more defining than that. That's not, I don't believe that's actually, maybe the term is not established, maybe it's,
But
and is there a distinction between what's a stable neighborhood?
Well, in land use terms, really what stable means is just that there's an existing pattern of land use. So anything could really be stable. A shopping center with new shopping centers that are coming beside it, that's a stable, that's considered to be a stable area.
What about a shopping center that's staying and has?
We look at the established land use patterns. The comprehensive plan doesn't talk about property values. It doesn't talk about how many sites, how many residential units are there or anything like that. So when you talk about an established residential neighborhood, it just means that there are residences there, and those residences are not part of a plan for development, or not part of a new plan for development. So if you're looking at a raw land development site beside that, it's the same type of same.
Yeah, the question becomes in here, as I see it, it says building.
It couldn't say existing.
Well,
Existing residential.
it says should be progressively scaled down to minimize encroachment into. And you've got established residential neighborhoods, but it just seems to be residential neighborhoods.
Existing residential.
Existing, established.
Okay. Change established to existing residential.
Well, I'm not sure that it does it, and I agree completely with Ken's point. I think what this is intending to say is if you're going to redevelop this here, make sure it's not like 10 stories next to single family detached, that there's some transition area or something like that. I think that's what it's intended to say. I think Tim's concern, as is my concern, that you don't necessarily want to take any land bank off the table. You let money drive that. So if you want to consolidate the neighborhood, like I was just talking about Wildwood, if that's economically feasible to do, you do it. You don't plan around that and try to determine what is established, what isn't. Because everything's somewhat established.
But if Wildwood were to consolidate and redevelop, but they're not going into the next neighborhood, you still have to have a transition from what happens at Wildwood to the next neighborhood. Right. So that's what this needs to be.
And I know it's intended to, but I share Tim's concerns that the way it's written, I think it could also be interpreted that getting into definitions of established or not established would keep you from considering or not considering something else. Am I putting words in your mouth? Or
no, that's pretty much accurate. I'm just trying to make sure that we are not limiting potential changes to existing residential patterns and homes. So as an example, and what Linwood would talk about Wildwood, there were a number of older, less desirable homes over in that area. Now, some of them have been changing over, but I would, it is an established neighborhood. And the pieces that I found on Lorton Road are old houses that are not particularly desirable and are have lost a lot of their.
So what if we change it to say to read encroachment into existing residential neighborhoods that are not part of a redevelopment plan?
Can I modify that ever so slightly? So I think the one thing I would say that's very similar to what Steve said would be if you wanted to remove the word established, you could say encroachment into residential neighborhoods outside of the core. And what that allows you to do is define that core and then define as
there you go.
as the opposite, the area outside of it. And then I think you've solved that problem. And it allows us to determine which of those neighborhoods that we think are appropriate for redevelopment.
We good with that?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll take a final vote. Let me do it that way. So. Any other edits or questions? Yeah.
The word in the fourth bullet down, it is minimize chances for displacement. How are we defining displacement?
Are you?
It's fourth bullet down.
Right below it.
Okay.
Yeah, below your last question.
What we would do for what staff would do, and I think what the planning commission the board would do is it'll go into the realm of what's already planned for, and at the minimum, what's already planned for in the county-wide policy for affordable housing preservation. So basically, that's the baseline. Now, if anyone wants to go above and beyond that, it would be their prerogative.
Could we change that a bit to not affect displacement, but make sure that whatever displacement or redevelopment takes place is has affordable housing components that would be greater than, equal to, or greater than that was what was already there. So what would be any of the displacement could be offset.
So do we?
And that's what I think that's what you all were trying to do with that. So.
Right, because there are some that so I look, and again, just out of the clear blue, and I look at something like our development just next door almost and I look at it and I go, they're affordable housing, but it's poorly used. There are very few homes that take up a lot of physical space, and you could get much better, newer product and then put more affordable housing in and get some additional housing and do a better job, I think.
And this is where you're saying preserving the affordability. You're not saying preserving the structure. So
Right.
that's how we would look at it. And that's what the county policy says too. So
Right.
this lines up with county policy.
But I want to make sure that we have a bit of that language in here that shows that it's not not touchable, that we can touch it, we go in there, if we can adjust that, I think that would be helpful.
It may be useful to say, like, by encouraging the preservation of and creation of housing, affordable housing. So you're not, preservation of generally means existing.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid, is trying to keep it as the existing ones, because I think the existing ones could be redone in a better fashion that would be more, it would say more, and do a better job of it.
But it good, just backing up a decade or whatever. And some land use patterns have changed, stuff like that. But we used to be, maybe even this goes back 15 years, we were the number one, or we were actually the number 2 spot for affordable housing in all of Fairfax County, next to Bailey's, Cross River. So we have always and still do have a large percentage of affordable houses in Lorton. And I'm not sure, my theory on affordable housing is it is most effective when it is spread everywhere, not just put in groups here and there or whatever. So I would be careful in talking about adding affordable housing opportunities. Not that I wouldn't accept them, but I don't want to encourage it, because we are already doing a good job at that here. And there's lots of other parts of the county that need to do some catching up with us to make it healthier.
One thing you have to think about in relationship to county policy, is when you create these suburban centers in areas that have access to services like more transit and stuff like that, the county policy is going to drive more affordable housing to this area. That's what we need to do. We need to have affordable housing close to those types of services.
Right. So I'm not sure we need to strengthen that, because it's going to happen by itself.
Well, I mean, again, while I agree that Lorton has had a higher share in the past, I think we have to recognize that the circumstances in the county and the circumstances in the country that we need more affordable housing.
Right.
That a suburban core that we're putting in place is going to encourage
Higher density.
higher densities with that, and we should be able to do that and should be able to deliver it along with everything else. And all I'm saying is I want to be able to say, I'm not trying to say we're going to take anything away, but we want to take some of those housing pieces and maybe redesign them so that we can get, not so we can expand them dramatically more, but there should be some more, and we should be able to do a better job.
No net loss of affordable.
There should be no net loss. There should be some.
So I'm actually, I'm trying to get a bit of clarification of what the issue is with how it's written now. Because how it's written, my interpretation is that it's addressing what we're talking about. You want to minimize the chance for displacement by encouraging the preservation of housing affordability and development of additional housing options, including affordable and workforce dwelling units. So I'm confused as to why we're doing a deep dive into this bullet, because to me, it seems as though it addresses what we're speaking about. It may be a bit more wordy, but it's addressing everything. We're not taking away affordability. We are actually addressing that. So,
You're right.
yeah.
You're right. You're right. My only clarification that I was looking for initially was just to say that the preservation was not, that preserving the structures that exist now should not be the focus. It is preserving the stock of available affordable housing.
Right.
So you're looking to strike preservation and then just encouraging
So let's.
housing affordability?
I'm sorry. It says preservation of housing affordability. It doesn't say preservation of housing. It says housing affordability.
That's it. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Talking about the structure.
Yeah, it's affordability.
Right.
That's what we have to, just let's examine these words because we're going down a rabbit hole. If we, we come in here, we need to examine this because, and I appreciate you, Stephen, sending this out, staff for putting it together. We've had time to look at it, put it down, pick it back up and look at it again. So let's just make sure that our interpretations, we get the meaning of the letter that's written down here so that we can all come to a consensus because it's my understanding that we don't have a whole lot of time to make this happen. And you all have been doing this for years. So we're the newcomers. We want to make sure that we go ahead and
You don't want to get old like
yeah,
us. Wait.
it's not going to happen.
The first 10 years go by in a flick.
I promise you, it's not going to happen.
So Graham wanted to add some comments.
She actually said it.
She asked.
She's right.
We chose the words housing affordability for that exact purpose.
For that, okay.
Yeah, it's funny, we all fill in the gaps in our own and what we
Yes.
say, housing, affordability, we're thinking of the affordable housing, it's always, preservation, right, going, okay, I just want to make sure we're not really getting there. But she's right.
I engaged with the conversation because it was brought up. I didn't study this and go through it with fine-tooth comb, but I agree, consider his interpretation of the language that's in there.
All right.
But that raises that point.
That was my only question. That was-
Yeah.
That's why I just want to make sure everybody was comfortable what that could be interpreted to say. That was my point.
Yes.
And the word affordability, the goal is that they be flexible. If you want to preserve existing housing stock, you can do that as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
All right. Any other questions before we go to a motion? Okay. And to be clear, Commissioner Sargent and myself, we are not voting because we have our day. When it comes forward. We're not? When the public hearing comes about, we will then have our opportunity to vote and we hear what you all are saying here today. So
So the only changes that we made today were 3. Did I track that correct? That's 1.
This one regarding Lorton Road,
Mm-hmm.
and then the next one was regarding the residential neighborhoods outside of the town center.
Okay, so just
Outside
2.
the club,
Just
yeah, too.
Yeah,
let the house of conservation as is.
Okay.
And thanks Wendy for putting that up and helping us all. Kind of. All
All right, so I have no objection as written and modified.
right. So we have a motion to adopt the May 8th, 2023 Lord Division Task Force Community Vision Statement as modified and presented. All in favor? Or do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor? Any abstentions? Any noes? Motion carries.
Anybody online?
Oh, nobody's online for the task force, I don't think. Oh, Dale is online.
Dale said that there's a message. that
I was
says-
earlier.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so. Moving right on. And I lost my place as to where.
Yeah, recommendations from the consultant.
So, sorry, I lost you. But sorry. So. Turn this over to our consultants to help us. Visualize all of it.
My screen, and I'm hopeful that these words will be now visualized and addressing some of the things that you're saying, which not only includes how do all of kind of the transportation components fit together, but also the phasing, how this happens, because it won't be, all at once. And so the land use and the transportation will be working together such that a different environment is created. So.
And I'd add one thing. So Lillian, and I'm not sure if we shared previously, but co-chair Nick Firth and myself, along with some staff and consultants, we did a tour of the area and Lorton Road, so they got to see and they understand what we're looking at. I mean, it really put eyes on it and visualize it. And it's not that they just looked at a map and just threw it at us. So thank you, guys.
Thank you all for having us. I know there was some information presented between when we were last here and kind of where you guys are today. And so we kind of just want to hit on a couple of things. I think the big area of kind of analysis that we had done was to start to understand where are these places that actually could change over time and what is the market, viability of that. And so we identified the areas of change and what we'll call areas of stability, really just to get a flavor of if there's going to be redevelopment where. We wanted to present some ideas on what that change could look like based on everything we've heard from you so far. We are also looking at some of the market dynamics to understand if there is a vision for change, will the market support it? And we want to talk to you about that. And then we want to talk about the public meeting date. So next slide is more words, which I don't want to go too deep into because we spent a lot of time on it, but just I think hopefully these are tracking with what you all just saw, because really what we're seeing as the policy framework here is that the land use in these core areas can change, and then those become places where people want to be, where they're walkable, they're mixed use, they're more compact, and they become these core centers of the area. It is an opportunity to intensify some of the residential within those core areas, within walking distance of the centers, and looking at building character that really activates the pedestrian streets and supports transit access into the nodes. We also noticed that there is opportunity to reposition some of the industrial land. And the idea there is whether it's on Richmond Highway or the little parcel kind of nestled between 95 and kind of Marketplace Center, look at those and kind of ask the question, can these be modernized? Is there another job-based use? Can they be upgraded over time? And so thinking about repositioning some of the industrial and really making sure that you all maintain a balance of residential and employment uses with infill residential and kind of keeping that balance of mixed use. For transportation, we did not designate any particular streets. What we are kind of saying is that as you look at these core areas, you want to slow the streets down. You want to make these places where it is safe to be a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And we've got some diagrams that we'll walk through with you on that. Because what we know about places is people make places. It's not just buildings, but people actually walking and out and about are what make places vibrant. So that's what we want to support. But what we know is that you all have all of these transportation assets coming into the area, and you don't want to cut any of those off. You just want to better manage them around the core areas where you're trying to promote people. And so really maximizing placemaking around kind of the streetscapes and pretty much what's in the language of the vision. Parks and Rec, we want better connected parks and trails that are not only central to kind of this suburban area, but to all of the other big park assets and open space assets around. So really building out your trail network, preserving your high value ecological assets while also allowing, if possible, some passive connectivity. So that basically means if you can put trails through some of the, green spaces, let's do that. And then some other things are just making sure that, and we're going to present to you some ideas on each of these nodes becoming their own district or brand so that people know, hey, I'm in the town center, or hey, I'm in this other place. So kind of having like a story behind each of these centers and having that branding kind of align with other economic development initiatives, particularly for South County, and then making sure all the placemaking and kind of heritage resources We keep doing adaptive reuse and public art that celebrates the history of the area, but also looks to the future. A lot of words. Again, these are just our words, but they kind of track the vision. So our areas of potential change, really we broke it down to three key things, or two big things, infill and redevelopment around the existing retail centers. I don't think that's a new idea. We agree with that. We see a ton of potential there. Just putting those on the map though, and starting to see, well, what does that say about what's possible here? And as you can see, we really started to focus on, this nodal pattern of these areas of change. And that led us to, okay, which of these are town centers, but also we do have these two employment nodes, particularly the industrial off of Richmond Highway, and then the job center kind of down to the south. So what we're looking at now is really we have 6 centers of possible kind of focus for the area. We want to be able to, again, reposition some of the industrial by enabling modernization, maybe some commercial plus industrial, and really have that be market driven. We know there's a county-wide study right now going on to look at all industrial land, and we want to be sure that this is thought of through that lens of some analysis to say, is this the best and highest use for industrial here compared to other places in the county? You had a question?
Yeah, just the biggest red block right
Yeah.
there. What's the logic of that? That's a landfill, pretty sure.
Correct.
Right.
So the logic is that other landfills have been redeveloped. There are other uses that are being imagined. It's just a large chunk of land that just is kind of saying, hey, there's an industrial kind of node, if you will, right at that place. And if you're going to keep it industrial, just imagining that whole kind of area for those uses as you reimagine it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, pretty hard on that one. Tim, do you agree with that?
What?
When we say hard, what do we mean?
Yeah.
Rainwater landfill. It has some it has issues they're trying to clean up, groundwater issues that it produces and stuff like that. It's kind of an old landfill, and it didn't have a lot of the proper linings and this and whatever. So it'll have its special kind of challenges. The tops of all the landfills around here have. They said, just saying.
Okay.
And that one is pretty largely filled to different levels all around. Not 100%, but absolutely. And I don't want to, although I'd love to see it develop someday, but might present some challenges.
Sure. I think we wanted to identify it as kind of again, it's adjacent to an area that's currently industrial. We're not proposing change to that industrial, but if you were to modernize it, what we know about industrial users is they need a lot of land.
Sure.
So if that landfill site becomes part of a strategy for this to be a new industrial node, it would elevate that as a more attractive place for industrial users, for modern industrial users. So that's why I got kind of,
Yeah, and
you think about
I guess you could do some things like
Sure.
outdoor storage and stuff like
Right.
that on the landfill
Right.
without too much.
okay. Okay, so yes, industrial repositioning and then connectivity. So the next slide is then we started to kind of try to put a story behind each of these. So going from kind of north to south, the first one is Lorton Town Center, and that's your existing kind of town center. And what we have heard and seen and know about this is that it's a town center that maybe hasn't fully realized its potential. So the goal there would be to continue to maybe infill with some housing, to fill in some of those parking areas that are underutilized, and to really continue to make it a there in terms of, we know there's a farmer's market that happens, and creating more things that can create third places, as we like to call it, where you're going to run into your neighbors. The second is what we're rebranding kind of Lorton Gateway, and this is really the marketplace area as it stands today, because this is where you do have the most kind of access to I-95. You're going to continue to get people coming off of there. You've got auto train. It's your most well-positioned kind of regional center because of the access to 95. So just really allowing it to transform into more of a regional commercial center of mixed use. And that's, again, thinking both housing and retail and potentially other uses that would be non-residential. Gunston Commons then is what we know just up the street here. And this is where you might be a more neighborhood serving town center. So this is where you would have some infill residential, you would keep your retail spaces. And this would also benefit from the future of bus rapid transit coming down Richmond Highway. So you can kind of orient a little bit around that future transit investment. The Lorton Community Hub, that's where we're sitting right now. We really see the opportunity if there is kind of redevelopment continuing to happen, maybe of some of the residential here, that there's some real connectivity opportunities between Lorton Gateway, so the number 2, and here where we're sitting. And if you really connected those by redeveloping some of the retail or residential, you could really create a strong place here where this is your civic hub, and then you kind of got your regional gateway out by the highway. And then node number 5, we rebranded it Lorton Works because just thinking of it as an industrial/employment use. And then Lorton South, it is already kind of an employment hub, but what we know about suburban employment hubs is that all over America, you're seeing people want to turn those into more mixed-use centers. So the potential of having some housing infill down there, in addition to just continuing to grow the workplace dynamics. So let me pause for a moment and just kind of get reactions or questions about this sort of, the potential evolution of all these centers.
So I would, so in Lorton South, so with that industrial uses there, those good. So would we be looking at reconfiguring or trying to build around?
I think there's opportunity for infill, like light infill residential. Yeah, and what you're seeing are you're seeing a lot of these kind of areas where, people want to be able to work someplace and also have a place to go to lunch, and maybe some people that can live nearby. And so these mixed-use industrial districts, mixed-use office parks are kind of the transition in the future. So just kind of acknowledging that that's a possibility down there. That's what we're really.
So I asked that question, and it's right off the aqualine.
Right.
There's so much potential that
Right.
people would want to live there.
Right.
But I like that.
Brittany was bringing up the same point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right across the street right across the river from Woodbridge North Woodbridge, which is
Right. Which is, yeah.
I particularly like the number 4, and I have long felt as though it could be a great connection piece between these two.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really good approach. And of course, that one of the main factors, and I'd like to see a little more detail. For me, one of the most important pieces, it's the connectivity between
HB not
1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
I mean, obviously 6 is a bit of a challenge, but I really want to see 1, 2, 3, and 4 really well connected together.
So what is 4? I understand the other just clearly, but to me, 4 is already pretty densely developed. Doesn't have a lot of opportunity. What are you identifying as the opportunities, and why are you drawing for 4?
If you see the little kind of red sliver right next to the dot there, I don't know if you can point it out.
Yeah.
That residential track
Yes.
has been identified that it's probably going to be one of the areas that could redevelop over time.
Cable Circle. Is that what it is?
Brandon, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Simply because, when we look at things very objectively, you're looking at land value to, that it's not maybe the best and highest use right now.
Right. It's really,
And that is one of those naturally occurring, probably affordable areas that if you were to redevelop that, you would want to be sure that you're replacing 1 for 1, but then also maybe you densify a little bit more. And in the redesign of that, think about how it could connect to this civic hub that we're sitting in right now,
Right.
with some great trails and walking paths. And then that also, you could maybe even get a little street in there to connect to the regional stuff.
There.
yeah,
Right.
Wendy's,
Yeah.
there's also there's a single owner that owns a lot of those.
Oh, really?
A lot of them, and they've been trying to sell them.
Really?
So it goes back,
But that was not always the case, right?
No.
Well,
They've had it for a while.
but it goes back to Wendy's point about having affordability,
That
right?
was exactly, that was the basis what I was trying to say. was
Right.
That community right there is likely to get converted over, could
Right.
potentially be converted over. Would have a dramatic effect. It connects
Yeah.
this side and the back side and then uses this as an anchor piece.
Yeah.
It's a really good idea.
what percentage does this person have?
I don't know, but I want to say about 100 and some odd units.
Is that half of them?
I don't remember.
Significant.
It's a significant.
And I think the significant point of this that goes back to conversations that have been had are when there are opportunities for that infill, ensuring that there's connectivity for bikes and pedestrians, but also cars. Because right now, a lot of how the streets are laid out, there's a lot of dead ends and there's a lot of, cul-de-sacs and that kind of thing happening. And so there's opportunity to create more places. So it's not just, these main arterials that folks are driving on, but there's some other ways to get to and from if you're living in the community, especially.
What would be your analysis of the number 6, the extreme southern one, because enormous redevelopment happening directly across the Occoquan from that right now.
Right.
With the Occoquan, the river that its crossings are Route 1 and 95. Do you think that helps the stuff just to the north of it, or does it make this stuff to the north of it? And I'm genuinely asking the question. I'm not trying to conversation. Does it kind of make it orphan, kind of less desirable to the already developed stuff to the south? Would it be considered not as desirable as the stuff to the south, which likely will be greater density and frankly have a significant head start on it? One other aspect of it is that the access to the stuff to the north is really limited because it's a cliff, basically. What are you guys'
Get an
opinion?
opportunity.
That's a good.
I mean, it's still,
Yeah.
it's the
Okay.
gateway into the county. It is at the bottom. Like it's a significant location. So it just seems like it has more potential than maybe.
So summarize, the stuff to the south and
Yeah.
William should be helping it, not hurting
Absolutely.
it.
There's opportunity to connect to some of the regional trails that are around from that location specifically.
Yeah, because it does have it goes under the highway, so you have connectivity there. There's a lot. I think it's an under recognized potential asset for an area, quite frankly.
And there's a lot of parkland right there. So Noble Park has a big park right here. Occoquan Regional Park. So
Okay, we're going to talk about roadways for a minute here. So what we are suggesting and kind of proposing, and it's kind of a best practice, is as you start to think about the identification of these core areas where you want people living, you want to create a there. That's what you're seeing in kind of the green, the dark teal green. Those are the zones where people are already walking. Those are kind of the walk sheds. So that's where you need to slow your traffic. And it's just that simple. In the areas of yellow, that's kind of the next tier when you slow it down. And then once you get out of those core areas, you kind of want to maintain the higher speeds because that's getting people into this community. So, I know there's been a lot of discussion about kind of which roads and how we treat each of them. Another way to approach it is to just kind of take this approach as A zone, B zone, and C zones and kind of say, depending on the context of the road, there's going to be a different design solution to how you slow the traffic and how you make it more pedestrian friendly. So that's one way to approach it, is that you don't get too prescriptive per se, but you basically, say, look, in all of these zones, which is pretty much all 4 quadrants now, we're saying we got to slow down the cars, right? Not to the point that we're cutting off these areas from cars, but we want to slow it down. So we just kind of put this together to illustrate that point, that it really is where you want your pedestrians, that's where you want to slow the cars down. Where you've got not a lot of pedestrian activity, you can kind of keep the cars flowing. That doesn't solve the problem of how you necessarily divert traffic. But as soon as you start to slow some cars down, if they can go another route and not pass through, they're going to. So that's another strategy to think about moving forward. Questions on
And
it?
it's not it's not trying to stop somebody or provision, it's just creating it better for
Yeah.
the local use.
If you slow roads down, you create friction for pass through. You just do.
Yeah, but, and we talked about this, and we were trying to think of options, because, Lorton Road is the bullseye of what we're talking about. But we tried to think of what other roads could you improve to take some load off? And the way they're designed, if you guys really drill down on it, there's not any options. There was an option, we'd be all over. And that's frankly why I was talking about maybe we need a bullet to talk about transportation
Right.
bypasses or or alternatives to help get the traffic out of our corridor.
Yeah.
So, but there's just not other. You say slow them down and send them somewhere else. No place. There's no options.
So what you can see on this is all of that roadway network. There's not a lot of connectivity, right?
Yeah.
And one of the big ideas here is as each of these centers evolves over time, you've got to start creating that network connectivity. That's not always the most popular thing. If you're saying to somebody who maybe has a dead end, we want to go through that dead end on your street or, along somebody's property line. So one of the big new connectors that could be created is, again, if this is a hub and this gets redeveloped over here, can you create a new local street on that edge? So it isn't, you're right, there's not a silver bullet.
Yeah,
here.
you see though, Lorton Road goes straight west.
Right.
But Potomac Road goes that way.
Yeah.
Route 1 goes that way.
Right.
The only thing even going close to that straight west is
Right.
Lorton Road.
Right. So it's gonna need to remain a place that people are going to go through, but we can slow it down. And that's really the point. Making that very deliberate decision to say that is kind of one of the key connectors that we know. We don't necessarily want to put restaurants right in frontage, but we do want to make that a safe place to bike and walk and better connect to the adjacent residential on both sides. So that's really the big idea.
So I came down, first, sorry I was late. I had an HOA annual meeting that went on for a while. But as I was coming down earlier around 5 something, it was backed up basically from the Occoquan River right here. As I pulled in, there was still traffic, down there. But, and all of those people are going, obviously leaving Fairfax County, right? They're going south of us. So as you slow down, these roads, doesn't in itself slowing it down make it maybe less appealing for people to come through our community?
Yeah. They'll stay
Because they're going, right, because the
95.
but
They're coming from.
some
Belmar.
do. Some are dropping off at Lorton Road.
Sure.
If you're ever coming off of Lorton Road, there's a lot of people that are coming off. The Telegraph Road. They're jumping up. I jump up on 95 all the time, and to me, I'm coming down. I get off on Albin.
Yeah.
And I go down Albin Road all the way to Pohick, left, cut through Lorton Station. Sorry.
It's a little slower.
It's consistent. Yeah. But if you slow it down and make it more of a local type road, it might not be that attractive for people to bail off or to decide to come, if you're on Telegraph Road, to not get on. Maybe it's better to get on 95 there. If you're coming like from Whiteman's, right, in Kingstown, for me, when I come down, I can go two ways. I can go down Telegraph to Route 1 right on Lorton, which is the way it'll go if 95 is backed up. But if 95, it's quicker for me to go, probably for you, Angelique, as well, to not go that route. It would be better to go down on 95, right?
But 95 is always backed up, so
Right.
I've done
Yes.
it.
But if we're more focused on the locals, then it might not seem as advantageous for those people to take that route.
There are options if 95 is not log jam. coming out of Fort Belmore, you can go out on the parkway and then go south.
Right.
If you could go south on 95, but you can't go south. Or you can park southbound.
Yes. You can, yeah.
So, next slide. Let's get back just real quick. So I think just to sum up the other thing with transportation, go back one more slide. Just really thinking about this approach and this zonal approach. But the other piece that we haven't mentioned is bus rapid transit. I know it's a long time down the road still, but the idea here that you all will be served by both VRE and bus rapid transit. You have these walkable centers. You're going to start to see, you know, people actually having options to drive, and that's going to help too. So there's, like I said, there's not a silver bullet. You're kind of at this kind of pinch point in terms of the flow going north to south, right? We know that's not going to go away. But if this is a more central place where people are living and working and the people locally are coming to, the pass-through folks are going to find another way. Even if it doesn't exist today, they probably will, because they're not going to want to come and go through slow town center traffic to get home every night. So it's just the way to start to conceptualize. Don't worry what people will do, say what you want. And then slowly over time, it will start to work itself out.
So we look at auto, are we thinking too far in advance about autonomous driving vehicles, what that will?
No, there's all sorts of wonderful predictions about that, which many are that, I mean, there's a couple of different ways you look at it. And Tom, you can chime in anytime if you want to, but from a planner's perspective, there's the idea that you're going to see a reduction in trips because less people will actually own their own cars.
Right.
There'll be one car per family or two cars per family, and they'll be autonomous. And so we will reduce our driving. The other ideas are that we won't have to park anymore because you'll get dropped off and the car will go and park someplace else or pick up another driver. Transportation as a service. That is another thing that's kind of, you know, bubbling around in people's brains. So there's all sorts of ideas. I think that the major routes like 95 and even Richmond Highway, if you imagine there was a lane that was dedicated to autonomous vehicles, you actually gain some capacity. So it allows cars to go more safely and reduces accidents. I mean, there's all sorts of what ifs. Right. I don't have a magic 8-ball, but there's people that are definitely studying that. Virginia DOT is studying it and looking at how do we get the most out of our transportation system if you know that we have more autonomous driving cars, which are safer.
And they can park at the land.
And they can park at the landfill.
I think it's a good thing to remember or what we're calling ourselves is the 2040 task force, which is 17 years from now.
Right.
17 years ago, nobody had an iPhone.
Right.
Right. So things have changed, incredibly fast. I've said this before, but my son always asked me how old I was when I got my first iPhone. And I said, 37.
So I guess that
It's really very
transportation
different.
is the means to get from these great places. So if you focus on the great places, transportation will start to eventually, it's going to react to the places that you're trying to create.
Mhm.
So, okay, this is a example, a hypothetical. I want to preface it by saying this is just to show you guys how these places might evolve from what they are today, which are pretty auto-oriented, lower density. So this is kind of the existing condition, and what you're seeing here is that it's built to really favor easy access by cars. So you've got the buildings turned, their backs are turned to the residential, to the north. It's really oriented to this giant parking lot in the middle that says, please come park here and come to our businesses. There's big building footprints. Surface parking really is the predominant land use in this sort of retail plaza. You've got big, long blocks. So if I am a pedestrian, I need to cross, I've got to go really far this way or really far that way to get across the street, those sorts of things. And this is a very common traditional suburban setting. When you talk about creating town centers, walkable centers, you start to look at the structure and you say, how would I reimagine it? And you go to the next slide and you start by introducing a gridded street pattern. So this is the same place, two different kind of ideas, what ifs, but the first thing you do is you start to put in that internal street network, because that creates, it creates a pedestrian scale, quite frankly. So you create a grid of streets. You have smaller building footprints. So whether those are residential building footprints or mixed use buildings or office buildings, and you just scale it down, even though the buildings are higher up, the street grid is smaller and it feels more human scale. You do more street connectivity, which does allow you to kind of disperse the traffic. So it's not all coming in and out of one, shopping plaza at one stoplight. You put the parking, you break it up, you can incorporate it into buildings, you can do structured parking, and you just make that not the dominant land use. And you create more opportunities for some of those kind of open space civic areas for gathering. What this is showing is just kind of different ways that you could go about redeveloping one of those retail centers. And what the big thing that we're really interested in is it isn't just these retail centers that would redevelop over time, but what you're seeing kind of in the kind of melon color is the walk shed. So the idea is as places redevelop, as some of the residential that's within walking distance, it too will likely want to redevelop. The market's going to want to do that. So in this plan, having some intentionality behind that to say, hey, if our commercial centers are redeveloping over time, we want to encourage kind of some of the residential, again, these are individual property owners, they're going to decide what they want to do, but can you start to create a little bit more density within walking distance to these nodes? Because what we know is that if you put enough housing within walking distance, you really, that creates your vibrant retail centers. So that's kind of just an example of the evolution of a center. If we go to the next slide, you can start to see just, these are two different versions. One would be on the bottom left, kind of what it looks like at 4 stories high. That dense redevelopment core right there. The next one is 8 stories. Is that the range that we could think about for some of these core areas? It may look like a lot right now, but if it's really kind of compact in that real small core area, and then you go to the next slide and you start to say, well, if we're going to have some density, boy, we better have a strategy to taper it off into the surrounding residential. So the whole kind of conversation we had before is that if you really look at it, it's the first 1/8 mile, 1/4 mile where you want your most dense, because that's your walk shed, and then you do taper it down to your single family, single story residential areas. So just imagine these are kind of little bullseyes where you've got the center of density and then it tapers off. This becomes really important if you are going to serve it by transit, by having everything within that walk shed. It becomes a really great way to support that pedestrian activity and vibrant streets and make places walkable and bikeable. So this is just, again, kind of to conceptualize the kind of places that, your vision might create in terms of the kind of transect approach to density. So we go to the slide. When we take those visualizations and we start to think about them through a policy lens, we're talking about, you were introduced to FARs and dwelling units per acre. We're talking about maybe 2 to 4 stories or 6 to 10 stories. Like, how dense do we go in these areas? And what we want to be able to kind of come back to you all with is all of those 5 centers or 6 centers that we identified. What's the right range, and what's the right sort of infill strategy in terms of going to a little bit more density? What's the right mix of uses? So even though we identified that South Lorton node as kind of a place for mixed use, it's predominantly jobs. So maybe it stays a job center and it only infills with 25% housing. Whereas maybe in your kind of right up here up the street, maybe that's more 50-50. You're doing, more housing, or maybe it's 75% housing and only 25% non-residential. Those are the sorts of things we want to think about. And then we want to look at the building footprints and the setbacks from the street, because that's how you create kind of the street character. If you're a pedestrian and you're walking along Richmond Highway, it's really overwhelming to have really fast cars going by. But if you build up what's called street enclosure, you have buildings right next to you, you feel safer because you've got kind of this buffer. You've got wide sidewalks. You feel more at scale with that big busy highway. So there's lots of things about building footprints and setbacks that we can, think about with policy to make it more of a walkable pedestrian character. We want to look at open space. The more dense we go, actually, the more green space you want. So you might think about in your most dense areas, having a requirement that there's a central park that goes along with it instead of just little pocket parks. Thinking about stormwater management and moving towards kind of green infrastructure strategies, which basically says if we have to accommodate stormwater, can we also turn those into assets for the community? Green spaces that are both attractive but also functional for stormwater management. And then for the streetscapes, it's pretty much what you all have been talking about for a long time. Larger sidewalks, street trees, pedestrian scaled signage, those sorts of things. And then parking. We just heard there's a Parking Reimagined, an initiative right now in Fairfax to really look at, we are still an auto-dominated county, particularly in this part of the county. So how do we just get more creative with our parking so it's not the predominant land use? And that gets to shared parking. It gets to maybe some structured parking, breaking the parking lot up and just being a lot more creative. So those are kind of the big picture policy considerations.
One of those things, you can
Sorry.
elaborate a little bit more
Yeah.
on the parking. So what shared parking?
Yeah. So shared parking means right now, the way parking is legislated at the site plan level, every commercial property and every homeowner kind of, it's regulated site by site. When you do shared parking, you say, okay, you know what? We're going to put a circle around this district.
Right.
And we're not going to force, the church to have one set of parking regs and these guys to have another, when we know that maybe the church is only filled on one day a week and it's empty the rest of the time. Wouldn't it be great if somebody else could use that parking?
Okay.
So it's making parking more of a kind of communal space, if you will, and that's what shared parking agreements are about. They require the landowners to agree to it, but you can have county policies that say we're going to allow shared parking, and therefore you don't end up over parking because you're making the most of different uses needing different parking or having different parking requirements at different times of day.
Okay. So the way that would be handled, I think I'm hearing you, is that for each business or residence or whatever, there is a requirement for X number of parking places per square foot.
Sure.
For example, in commercial. Are you saying that not just that land bed would be considered, it would be a percentage of parking for a group or something like that? So is there something that would keep the first guy from being able to go crazy with density and then everybody else around suffer with really expensive parking if they want to go more dense?
So the mechanics of how you would implement that, I'm going to defer to your great zoning folks and the Parking Reimagined, because those are the sorts of things that they're studying.
Right.
But what I do know is just think about it very logically, that if you're planning, so take best example I could think of right now is Shirlington, kind of up in my neck of the woods in Alexandria, where you've got some office towers there that build the structured parking, and they don't need the parking after 5 p.m. So all of a sudden it opens up to the retail. So that's a shared parking agreement. So as that whole area kind of redeveloped, someone's keeping the tally of all the parking that's needed.
Yeah.
But then figuring out, okay, where can we have some shared agreements for those sort of daytime, nighttime events and that sort of thing.
And the structured is just that. That's just multi-level spark.
That's right.
That's parking.
Yeah, yeah. And again, these are what you do need if you want to go a little more dense, because otherwise you have too much parking and you don't want to consume all your great land for parking. It's the least productive use of your land, if you can.
So somewhere like the city, okay, where there's just no options for parking anywhere.
Right.
A business is going to thrive whether they have parking lot or not. But for our businesses in the suburbs to be successful, they have to be able to attract people from outside just their little
That's right.
node. So you have to have parking
You
for
still have
those
to have
people
That's right.
that come in. And
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
only point is the parking standards that are applied to the city will never work here.
You're not a city yet. No, you're
Right.
still a suburb and it's still pretty
Yeah.
auto-dominated and vehicular traffic is still going to be needed to support businesses. Absolutely.
But at the same point in time, a lot of what we're looking to do is to build in density that then serves by the exact, community development that we're creating, is so that it can be a walkable, livable area. Yes, they'll still be coming in, so yes, we'll have it. But parking cannot drive the equation. In fact, it's the same challenge we have at the Workhouse Art Center. The designs that we had proposed to come up with that has, I think a 10-figure number, if I did just 10-figure number just to deal with all the parking that's necessary for that. It drives everything else. And I was reading an article about the Los Angeles Amphitheater or whatever, or not, it's not that piece, but something over there, that the number of performances they have is driven not by the schedule of anything else, but it's to meet the cost of offset all the costs of parking to drive it. And we can't let the parking drive the whole thing.
No, and so if you want to keep these areas thriving, you put a bunch of rooftops there where people don't have to get in their cars to go and frequent all the things you want them to go visit. And that's the trade.
So like what I think it's helpful to think of examples too. Like it's not going to be like Washington DC, right? But it's going to be more like places like Fairfax Corner, or like Shirlington.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to parking, and it may be a variety of scales. I don't know what the scale is going to look like in the end, or what you end up. But that's like probably the kind of parking that you'd be thinking about. More structured parking, some on-street parking, place like that. I think Fairfax Corner is a good example. Shirlington, maybe a little bit bigger, but I'll probably show a good example.
But just remember my point though.
Yeah.
That you're going to have to make the businesses thrive in your walkable area. You're going to have to attract more than just the walkable people. So,
Yep.
And to attract them, they have to have some place to park.
Commissioner Sauza?
I had a quick question on your thoughts for this as you look at this area, the potential for or not kind of remote work live areas that we're seeing elsewhere. We see a lot with remodeling existing commercial buildings, but this is an opportunity to create it more specifically. If you thought it would work, I'm just curious.
I think that folks that are in positions where they can work from home, they also want to be in places where they can go and grab a bite to eat and still interact with people. So places, at least, and again, this is very anecdotal, but we're seeing two trends just in the work that I do, that the offices where you actually are in these really vibrant downtowns, it's Class A, there's a ton of things to do. It's easier to get people to come back in. It's your suburban parks that you're going to have to really, and just bringing in bagels isn't going to do it, right? Like these are places.
Exactly.
So what you're finding, and what we've heard a lot of smaller communities trying to do, is to advocate, well, stay home. Let us build, like we're doing work in Brunswick, Maryland right now. And that's one of the things that they're thinking about, is can they build up their Main Street retail based on now their captive audience of at-home workers. And there's a little bit that they're starting to see pick up as a result of that. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the at-home kind of user now is a potential customer for midday things. If they're not having to go someplace else, it has the potential to spark retail. I don't think there's good data on it yet, but conceptually, that's what a lot of people are talking about.
We've seen some other examples of that, some retrofitting especially. This would seem to have some of the opportunities, especially if you had, shuttle connectivity between the nodes.
Yeah.
So if you're at home, it might, I don't know, I'll defer to you, but it might be worth referencing it.
In some of the language, yeah, no, I think that's a good call. All right, so let's keep going because we don't have too much more.
Yeah. Well, so It is already 8:05 and we were set only until 8.
Okay.
So I do want to acknowledge
Yes.
that now.
So Chair, is there, do you want us to keep going? We've got a few more slides.
Sorry.
And then it's,
So,
Well, we've been trying to ask him questions along the way, though, so.
Yeah, we do get good help in tonight.
I don't want to say 30, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
next thing on the agenda is questions, but we.
Okay.
so I did want to mention something though, within like the building heights that are mentioned here. Something that is different from going from this form of development to something that looks like this is that it's not, with this, the entire building is kind of one height. When you move to this type of pattern, you can have varying heights, and so it doesn't all feel as aggressive. And so I think that's just important as we move forward in thinking about what's appropriate in these areas, and we think about this transect, and it can scale down to where by the time you get to the single family households, it doesn't feel overwhelming. It's more of the scale of that. So.
Okay, so we talked about the evolution of place. Wanted to quickly give you an update on kind of the market dynamics. And so our partners with SB Freeman, Lance Dorn, they've been at work. They've talked to folks at the county to really understand if you want the market to come and the market's not ready, what are the tools that the county has to bring the market? So they're doing more outreach on that. They're talking to developers here in Fairfax County to just kind of understand what are your perspectives on what could happen in this area and how strong is it today versus, are we still a couple decades out? They're putting together a set of case studies to just kind of show, examples of this sort of redevelopment and infill over time. They're also going to be talking with the major property owners in all of the areas of potential change, just to kind of get a flavor of, are you guys thinking of redeveloping today, tomorrow, or what are your current plans? We go to the next slide. What they've heard so far is that, any county-owned land is always of interest to the development community. So that's something that you all can use as kind of a leverage point. If you've got county-owned land and you want to get a certain kind of development here. There are a lot of county programs that are already out there to support redevelopment. There's, areas near transit and commuter rail. Those become hubs for increased density. Fairfax County remains, big picture, a very desirable place for corporations and expansion and relocation. And I think this is where the industrial space started to become somewhat interesting, because I think Lance's team is saying there is still a demand here for R&D space, kind of high tech, that footprint. You need to update those buildings, but maybe those become hubs for, that sort of demand in terms of office space or light industrial space. Economic development folks are supportive and intensifying the industrial and flex uses on Richmond Highway. And as we mentioned, the high intensity industrial flex use could also accommodate not just industrial, but commercial. The next time we come in front of you, we're going to bring Lance to kind of walk through this in more detail. But what we just want you all to know is that the redevelopment vision is just the vision. The policies and the codes are going to have to come next, and there's going to be other intervention required. And so first and foremost is to make great places, and then you will start to kind of, if you have a strong vision, that sends a signal to the marketplace that there's something here. So in thinking about placemaking for economic development, that's really investing in kind of the improved streetscapes. It's about putting more employment-based uses here. Another thing is having that land use framework that really promotes kind of this vision and the need for additional housing in our region and flex industrial space. That's one of the big that's what positions you all as a pretty good place for this sort of infill and redevelopment. And private owners could control a lot of, well, they do. You have private owners that can control a lot of the areas of potential change. Redevelopment is going to be challenging in those areas until they are ready. So just kind of, keeping your expectations, in check to some of those larger property owners. But nonetheless, there are all these different tools that are out there to kind of do strategic intervention, having a vision, doing the comp plan amendment, updating the zoning. You all are this is the pathway you're on. Once you get through this, and by the way, the regulatory framework, this is what's happened in Tyson's. They created a whole new urban district, a new regulatory framework to really change the building character of Tyson's. So we're not suggesting this is the next Tyson's, but we're saying that sort of regulatory framework is what's needed to really encourage your redevelopment and infill to support your vision. But beyond those tools, the next slide is, there's additional interventions. There could be direct investment by the county in some of the public realm and infrastructure. So whether it's the trails, whether it's, other amenities that would signal to community or developers, hey, the county is investing here, let's invest here. The county could buy land and actually activate particular parcels for strategic redevelopment. They can offer up more development incentives. And then, building on some of where I think this project started, the economic development interest really organizing around the Lorton kind of story and targeting employment that wants to be in a place that matches your vision. So those are some of the other things. And like I said, Lance will be here to talk with you guys next about it. So with that, I think our next slide is questions. A, did we get it right? Are we in check with all the things that you thought we were up to? We're going to come back to you with case studies and more recommendations on the market interventions. We're going to do a community open house late June, July. We won't go to the community, though, without you seeing kind of what we're going to go to them with. So we will be briefing you one more time before that. And then we'll be working with staff on kind of drafting policies and final reporting.
Thank you. Awesome presentation. Really kind of crystallizing a lot of things. So we have about 17 minutes. So let's kind of go around the room. Let's start with Angelique, and let's go around the room and see if there's any questions or anything to add.
There's no questions. I like the way you laid it out. You gave us options and foot stomped a lot, like having a strong vision, then everything else will come into place. So you said that repeatedly, and I noted that. So thank you.
Thank you. Wendy.
I agree with Angelique. I appreciate the work that you all put into it as far as the options are concerned, and actually laying out the possible six core areas that I guess, were not considered previously. So I'm in agreement with the presentation. I thought it was well thought out, well put together. Give us something to actually consider going forward.
Again, I think it's a good progress, and thank you for getting us there. I think one of the key pieces that we still need to, I tell you that we're going to need to get is what has to be determined ultimately is that we want certain aspects, which is the food, the shopping, the pieces in this walkable town. But we don't have a concept yet of how much density that makes or how many housing that's going to take, where that could be, how it could be done up. And I think that ultimately, before we go to the community, I think we need a better sense, because we might say we want all these things, but to get it, and we want to make sure it's successful. We don't want it to get it so we could just maybe get there, or maybe it might survive. I think we need to say, if we got this and we did this, we could have enough of the here to make this here work. And so I think we just need some better sense of what that amount might be.
Right. Those numbers. One thing I'll say, and this is a bit of the challenge right now in kind of where we are in terms of retail used to be very predictable. It is not very predictable these days. And so there's kind of a little bit of, I'll leave you with this. If you create these great places where people want to live by also having kind of non-residential uses that could be retail, could be restaurants, could be civic uses, could be incubator space for business, could be all of these other things. Just having the right balance of the community character and kind of enough density to create a there, it can market proof you a little bit. But I hear what you're saying. What we will do and what we're kind of tasked with is just, order of magnitude, how many residential units, and what's the split of residential to non-residential, and we'll look at those.
Again, I think, and you make a very good point, and I've got projects going on other places, and it's always, the town and everything wants the commercial and all that. It's the last thing that's gonna sell.
Right.
It's the very last piece, and nobody wants to jump into that part. They want to do the resident, they want to do all that part. That we'll see when there's enough demand. So I get it, but I think in general, I really liked your discussion about creating that street infrastructure, because that is what it makes it so you can get out of the sun, you can get in places, you can walk back down each of the, and each one is a little unique or a little different that you can see. It's out, therefore we want to have different heights. We might not even, we want to probably create, some enough language around the facades and how they come in, so as to create those interesting pieces. The really nice little towns and things like that have all these old structures that have been redone that make them all interesting. We've got to create it somewhat out of whole cloth, which makes it a little more challenging.
Yeah.
Nick. So I don't know how much I missed, but what I saw, it was great. Yeah, that was my last call. One of the interesting things that came up on my last call, though, and I live in a community with 85 homes, and 3 people brought it up, and I finally answered things. They wanted a pool with a clubhouse. Like, okay, we're 85 homes.
Right.
Let's just say 1.5 million to build this. Let's start doing some math here.
Yeah.
I know what we all want.
You could,
Right.
for 1.5.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, that would be the dinkiest looking thing. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's never going to happen, right? And that's kind of going back to the point, which we've been talking about for a long time, is what is the tolerance for everybody? Everybody lays out their wish list, right?
Right.
Anytime you put out a survey and say, what do you want? I mean, the bowling alleys, the movie theaters, everything gets thrown on the table. But there's then, a price point for that. It also, you can get it, right? But it also comes with this. And part of it is that, there's adding rooftops of people, living here and being able to utilize that. But then there's attracting people kind of from other areas. But then with a lot of things that support these local businesses, which we don't have a lot of right now, are people who would go Monday through Friday before 5 p.m. The people who, you're either working from home, which a couple of my neighbors work from home, and I'm not sure if they're working, to be honest. Because they generally have the grass cut by the time I get them. But they're able to go out and about and do their thing, right? But also having people, a mix of people that actually work here that would go out for that lunch, and frequent those places that you need for them to kind of survive. It almost seems to me when you build like a development, or there's 2 things that come last: commercial and transportation improvements, right? And so, some form of a balance of bringing, some of these things in and attracting it with enough momentum to not just leave us with what we have in the current Lorton town center. Was the residences kind of came in, and I think everybody's kind of still waiting for the businesses to kind of come in, the businesses that they're looking for, as well as Liberty as well. It was a bit the same, that everybody's moved in and they're going like, I moved here because they're with my stuff, and it's still not open. And my last call included the developer who was building it out, and I'm asking him, when is that ladle opening? And he's like, end of August, but it could be longer. And it's like, well, geez, they're planning. I mean, how long has it been? They were supposed to open like last spring, I think. I don't even know at this point. So it's got to have enough momentum, I guess.
What's nice about your 2 nodes, though,
Mhm.
the regional gateway that sits right next to 95,
Mhm.
and then this one over here on Richmond Highway, those 2 have visibility that the other developments don't have. They're just off the beaten track.
Yeah.
Whereas those two, all that pass-through traffic, just the visibility, people know, oh, wait, there's a there now. I'm gonna stop or I'm gonna come back on Saturday. So, like, they're just located and that's why I think these are so strategic. Like, these have a lot of potential because of that visibility and the high access they already have to transportation. So you can, in theory, you're gonna get both. You're gonna get the infill with the residents, and so it'll be very local serving, but from a employer perspective, a retailer perspective, you also have that Richmond Highway traffic and you have I-95 that if you go a little vertical right next to that interchange, it's a there that someone might stop. So there's a lot of differences about these places than I think some of the others that are just tucked away enough that they're not getting as much of that pass-by traffic recognition.
Have you explained there, or can we use that as?
No, I didn't coin that.
Great either.
Who coined that? I need that, my planning history. We all need it there.
I think it's got
Commissioner Sog.
I have about 5 thoughts here. I'm just going to throw them out. With them as you will. I think as this area continues to grow in the future, it's going to be a while before you attract those businesses. But you can attract the people. And part of the way you attract the people is looking at surrounding attractions, such as Stone Ridge down in Prince William, such as conveniences and amenities such as the Costco, and others. There's sites up there now that are zoned industrial that are now being considered for other commercial uses too. So that may be your nearby commercial site, your nearby business office site. The other thoughts too are just ensuring that in your design, you capture what the community has been saying about traffic management. So that's incorporated. That's extremely important for folks. The county is sensitive to the issue of preservation of industrial areas. That's going to be a big issue because we're all clamoring to get rid of those and use them for other things. The two other thoughts. One is development near mass transit. We had talked about that in previous iterations of the visioning process, that the design closer to VRE, for example, could be more intense and more commercial and residential density. So because you have a chance to pull people off those trains, and live there and or just enjoy getting off there for once. And finally, just something to be sensitive to as we look at higher density. That's the school side. An elementary school down here. Consider preserving land in some fashion so that there is room for growth in the school system. Other than that, I got nothing.
I don't think I've heard a single thing I disagree with as we've gone around the here tonight. I'm going to be really brief. As I've already said, all my thoughts. But one thing I will say is I think it's been pretty clear as we've gone through this process so far that the community in the task force never supported anything close to 10 stories. About the most we ever came up with a consensus for 6 stories. If anybody remembers different, please correct me. But as we go to the more dense options that we talk about, it makes sense that maybe it starts pulling in things that we've kind of discounted in the past because of the land values with their current density, like the woods of Fairfax. I think we were back in the beginning talking about 4-story kind of thing. We were saying, oh, the woods of Fairfax property values are too high to encourage redevelopment at 4 stories. But A, is the potential value of 6 stories enough to redevelop woods of Fairfax? Because I'm trying to think. I mean, those buildings are 50 or 60 years old now. Yeah, something like that. So if we could get some nice gridded streetscape, some retail mixed in there, and not the garden apartments, which are great, but they're not bad either.
Right.
They're kind of medium, I would say. But so just as we're talking about and as we're talking about more dense things, does it bring in
You're saying that maybe an openness, maybe not to 10 stories, but let's just play that out. If all of these other vision elements are there and it makes a deal happen sooner rather than later, that laying that out as an option is.
Well,
worth exploring.
I've always been attracted, and I brought it up at our very first meeting, Woods of Fairfax. And it's owned by one person and it's 50 years old. And all you got to do is get one guy to say, I like that idea. So I thought it's big enough that it's a great domino, to start with. So,
But I just to caution you that, it's like, I looked at that because you were talking about
Right.
that. And I think Dick and I went through and pulled up the zoning, pulled up all the aspects of the values on it. And I think it was like, you need to get them like $5 million an acre, to cover what they currently have. So it makes it hard.
but I mean, to me, I'm so happy that we really seem to be getting organized and drilling down into, it takes this to get that.
Right.
And we're studying this to get that.
Ultimately-
So I'm thinking, they show me the numbers on Woods of Fairfax. Now that we're talking about, maybe 6 stories instead of 4, just.
It is what it is. Let's see.
Yeah.
What do we need to do to make it potentially work?
Yeah.
My first thought was, what does it need to make it work as do we envision? And then can we tolerate? And is that something we can?
I mean, wouldn't it be nice to get rid of 50-year-old garden apartments?
Don't have it, they don't bother me, Brett. They're not a force in the neighborhood.
It's a big thing.
Okay.
Well, I would say this, and to Linda's point, and Angela's point about your presentation. I thought it was well done, excellent, and explained in the sense that I hadn't heard before, talking about the tapering as you get to residential neighborhoods and the grid of streets. And I think that makes it more powerful for 6 stories, 8 stories, 10 stories, right? So I think that makes a difference, the way you laid it out, and it makes it.
That language is in current.
Yeah, that it's not all or one.
Yeah.
Everything.
Right, okay, yeah. But it wasn't, but in a presentation format like this, I did not hear that.
I'm thrilled with the current consulting.
Yeah.
I like what I'm hearing. I like the way it's being approached and organized. So thank you very much.
Maybe I wasn't listening in the last 9 years, but I think that there seems to be more of a strategy in transportation and transit than we've heard previously. Which is helpful.
And frankly, my personal opinion is Fairfax County hasn't liked to hear about or talk in my lifetime. So age fell on in Fairfax. So when we talk about transportation, that is such a necessary thing.
So our next meeting in June, we're going to talk about transportation, and I'm glad I did it here. 2 more meetings?
I don't think we have I don't think we have another, I don't think we're going to do the May 22nd meeting just because you all have adopted the meeting plan, and we're going to get to work now, and we're talking about the policy at the staff level, and I think Kate and Becca, they'll be working on some of the design aspects and everything like that to kind of show you how the visiting statement becomes conceptualized. So at this point, there's no use for a May. So the next time we come back would be sometime in early June. With FCDOT, and then again with Kate.
So to close out the meeting, the staff have anything else for us before we get to cake? Just saying.
Just picking up on, I just want to make sure it's clear, picking up on something that Lynn was said earlier about looking at the areas south. He doesn't want those to take away from the core. I hope Kate and Becca kind of talked about tonight showed you that the plan is to see how those areas actually support the core and bring the core, elevate the core. So,
But a thought that I was having in the discussion and stuff like that, that core will never be walkable to this core.
and I don't think that's
So, and we've been trying to make this walkable. So to me, that's an island down there. And certainly is worthy of consideration for planning for all the reasons that we've talked about. But it's not going to be walkable to this walkable phase two.
They may not.
I think it's its own thing.
Yeah.
I'll say about that too, and this is, I also did coin this term, a wonderful landscape architect from Indianapolis. Think of transit as your pedestrian arterial.
Yeah.
So what that means is if you create this big walkable core here, but you have really great transit service on Richmond Highway, you can still be a pedestrian living down in the South Core and come up here. So it's just another piece of the transportation puzzle. So, yeah.
It could be supported.
It could be supported, sure. Sure.
And I also just wanted to bring attention to, I think the late June internally, we had not been able to find a date that worked because we were targeting a Saturday. So that we could actually get a lot of the community to come, hopefully. And so the specific date that we had actually looked at was July 15th, which is a Saturday because July 8th is very close to the 4th.
You know, we told you the first night you showed up here, if you started talking about community meetings, we were screen. We had lots of community meetings with very little information. So I really want to see what you want to show the community. I do want to take something to the community, but we are very close to on the verge. If we show them the same thing without detail, then again, you're just going to wear them out and they're not going to have any interest at all. Absolutely community. That sounds a little fast.
July.
Yeah.
So
And frankly, the middle of the summer, and I know it's not my motive to push it off until September, but nobody wants to do anything in the summertime.
We need to wait till 11 or 12 years.
But what's the
No, no.
deadline that they have though? There's a deadline.
Yeah.
We're the staff. We'll take guidance from you.
Yes, one other thing to note that'll be going to the community, again, it's gonna be this community visioning statement that you have adopted now that says this is your reaction to the community, but it's also gonna be their reaction and concept to what you've done. And like they were saying before, they will bring it back to you before it goes to the community. So it won't be the community saying the same thing. Like even with some of the designs you've seen for height and some of the things that Walter was talking about with, you know, how the heights might step.
We've had vision statements for every one of those meetings. That's old news, and we have not changed this vision statement that much. You have to show people what you come up with. And that's these things we're talking about, the buildings, the pathways, the linkages, all that kind of stuff. All right, because this visioning stuff has been exhausted already.
That's what we're here tonight.
And that's why we're getting
Hear that tonight.
the visioning statement is
I'm talking about in the last 10 years, it's been exhausted.
the
The concept has been the same. We want a town center. We want to redevelop a town center that serves the core of Lorton. That has been the vision for a decade now. It's still the vision.
Please remember that the vision statement you adopted tonight, though, is actually the first part of the comprehensive plan. So we're in the process of writing the plan now. So that's what the community is going to understand. The plan is being written. We're not doing a lot of brainstorming and things of that nature, but I think there still is a need to before anyone goes too far down the road and you have a complete set of drawings that the task force is okay with, kind of like Tim was saying. And then you turn around and the consultants that put all this work in doing something that you are finally fully okay with, but then the community isn't okay.
Just make sure you have something new to show up. And I'm not hearing that you are planning on having anything new yet. We've showed them pictures of density before at the other community.
They have not seen the types of concepts that they showed tonight, though.
We've seen pictures at the last community meeting of different densities and what the densities look like. We've also shown them that these are the nodes that are being considered. And we've also showed them mission statements. These are not new.
That's not what we're going to show the community now. I think that's what they're trying to show. The reason they showed it to you,
That's the next step.
the reason they showed it to you for how Augusta Plaza could look, and I think you all kind of had some reactions to that and kind of have a better understanding. And that's for the next step.
As we talk more about the tapering to the neighborhood. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear you. We hear your point about
It won't be a repeat.
That's the next step. That's what we're going to solve.
And Am I the only one that feels this way?
So I think that,
But I think we
you know,
got,
before you get involved in like land use and other things, you know, if you go and ask your neighbor, you know, how they feel about the comprehensive plan and the language that's in it, pretty sure they won't know what it is, right? The average person who would show up for these that you're interested in getting some feedback from aren't involved and won't know anything about land use guidelines or comprehensive plans or, you know, SSPAs, PCAs, PDH, nothing, right? So they're looking for something of substance that they can kind of, if you're looking to get proper feedback from the community, it's got to be something that they go, I get it, and be able to ask a question about it. You want some form of interaction back and forth and not just somebody reading, you know, some of this stuff, which is very important that we've come up with, but I'm not sure if they'll be able to react to it and say that they would change this or that, or my personal feeling would be that they would say, I don't disagree with it, but I don't get it. And so I think you've got to come back with something that, and I think the people that are fairly representative at this table, and I think we know our community, you know, fairly well. And when we've been able to kind of go over some of the things that we've been asking for as far as, you know, here it is, this is what people are asking for, what does it kind of look like? And I think when we can digest that and get that kind of ironed out between us, I think we'll have a fairly good product to bring to the community to say, what do you think? You know, we're not there yet, but here's a bit of a general idea of a reaction to what the last time we went to you, you told us kind of what you wanted. And here's a bit of a concept to include those depictions from tonight that had those, like where Gunston Plaza is. And you had it as Gunston Commons. It is Gunston Plaza.
But we're gonna rename it.
Okay.
Yeah.
To expand it beyond just the
Yeah.
one site, but
I just want to make a couple of statements about the visualizations, because I do think it's important to not present one visualization either, because you can't promise that to
Yeah,
this
sure,
community.
yeah.
And you don't want to set expectations, but what I think I'm hearing is if we're going to present, kind of like we did tonight, maybe for each area, we've got like 3 different options, and it's just kind of saying, look, the range here, what's most important to know? A grid of streets, connectivity to the neighborhoods, the, you know, just the design concepts with some
Maybe
visuals.
you could also though get pictures of other community types or other pieces like that would say, it would be something
Like that streetscape would be like-
similar
yeah.
to these sorts of environments to give people something. The truth is, most people don't have the ability to visualize. So we need to give them something visually that they can say, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, okay.
But I think the idea is this, that we don't get too far ahead of the community, right?
Right.
We need the community to kind of, we need to pause and the community is able to react to what we've done, but they also need to understand and conceptualize.
Yep.
A bit of what we've been working on. So.
All right, we're cookies.
that's right. Thank you all.